can take right now that are wise. You can choose wisely right now to master your life and your destiny. And you know how it's done? It's really simple. You just check what cycles of life you're in. Those are about 9 different cycles. From long to short, you have your soul personality based on your birthday. Then you have the overall simple period of human life from 0 to 144 years. Then you have the annual life cycle period of 365 days, starting on your birthday, divided into 7 segments of about 52 days. And this includes the annual health, business, and personal life cycle period, right? Then you have the long lunar unit of 3.5 days. It always alternates between negative and positive, right? Based on the date of the new moon or the full moon, you can identify it. And as a general rule, for example, you've got 3.5 days after a new moon is a negative long lunar unit. And then 3.5 days after a new moon, a 3.5 day positive lunar unit starts. And this goes on and on and on, right? And then you've got the short lunar unit of the tides of 12 hours. Using a tide chart from the nearest maritime location, you can see what the tides are when there's a high one, when there's a low one, when there's a high one, when there's a low one, right? And so on. This indicates to us and is like a reading mechanism from nature of what the lunar units are, what phases the energy that powers the universe is going through, either negative or positive, and combinations thereof, resulting in generally either double negative, negative, neutral, positive, or double positive states, essentially. And these change every 3 hours, approximately. And then also you have the daily period of the cycles of life of 3 hours, 25 minutes, where if there are 7 a day, 7 days makes us strong, right? So having an overview of these cycles every couple of hours, or maybe, generally at minimum once a day. Moreover, though, you should have an overview of these cycles every 3 hours, automatically as a basic safety mechanism, because every 3 hours, the shortest of the short lunar units actually, see, it changes from negative to positive, from positive to negative, and so on. Okay, I'm going to explain this for a second, why this is important to check these 9 different cycles every 3 hours, actually, if possible. The reason is because, like I said, okay, let's just simply look at 2 important cycles for a second. 2 very important cycles, and it's the short lunar unit and the long lunar unit. So these are like cycles 2 and 3 of about 9 that you should pay attention to, right? Often, every 3 hours actually, if you really would like to be accurate and informed and know what state the universe and the world is in, energetically, so to say, and have an overview of what the quality of the energy is that has and gives way to how and affects Earth, human, and life activity. You should pay attention to this. So the reason is this. So we're looking at cycles 2 and 3 of 9 different ones, right? Just again to summarize, from 1 to 9, from short to long, you have the daily period, number 1, the daily period, number 2, the short lunar unit, number 3, the long lunar unit, Number 4, the annual life cycle period, with the health, business, and personal life cycle included in that. And then the simple period of overall human life and your soul personality. That is also during all of your earthly existence, for example, from 0 to 144 years. So there's about 9 cycles that are relevant. Now, cycles number 2 and 3 of these are the short lunar unit and the long lunar unit. Now, I'm going to explain why this has to be watched every 3 hours, ideally, as much as possible. Obviously, there have been instances where I have been out in the wild on journeys, and I was glad that I had a watch to even see what time of the day it was. Yet, always Providence provides, and even so that you can map this all out. So look, cycles 2 and 3, the short and the long lunar unit, right? These are actually very, very important because, see, the lunar short and the lunar long unit, these are like phases that the moon that the moon actually goes and expresses and thereby also has an effect on Earth, human, and life activity by this mechanism that also generates the tides and leads to a high tide and then a low tide. And then a high tide and then a low tide, right? So to explain this for a second, it appears to be the case that, as a general rule, as far as we can comprehend, the universe is filled with this natural life-giving energy, and that manifests itself in manifold, creations and forms of life, right? And this universal life force that can also be mapped or identified partially, though, generally also logically as like a energy that powers the total complete universe. This goes through, or at minimum though, it can be safely stated that within this heavens and earth plane system, this matrix, this womb of creation, where we as human beings, created in the image of God and after His own likeness, live and operate, right, in this heavens and earth plane, and in this earthly divine human existence, heavenly, hopefully, yeah. Basically, this system, you have the heavenly bodies, the sun, the moon, there's time. Time is actually a way of mapping the perfect geometrical and like straightforward way that all of creation in the universe is steadily, perfectly moving forward, and creation is going on harmoniously, perfectly. And this is visible by how the sun rises in the east, sets in the west. You have daytime, nighttime. And also, this is all systematic, and it's based on how in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and also based on the fact that the Creator perfectly geometrized in the beginning. So from the very beginning of creation, so to say, the Creator made it so that it would all basically go from like beginning to eternity in a perfect geometric, beautiful, absolutely perfect, balanced way, sort of. Okay? Now, when we have this thing where there's tides, there's a high tide, 6 hours later, approximately low tide. 6 hours later again, approximately high tide. Like high tide, low tide, high tide, low tide. So that is a key thing. That's like a thing on the dashboard of the universe to pay attention to, because the energy that powers the universe systematically in this system here, this heavens and earth plane, I can safely state, further beyond, it seems to be that there's just a creator out there. Yet, in this system, and with the moon, the sun, earth plane, humans, animal, plant life, all that, earth, human, and life activity, the energy that powers all of this goes through a balance and a perfect mode of phases. So, for example, the energy that's powering the universe systematically goes through phases that lead to and result in the perfect existence of life in its multiplicity, like male and female, day and night, etc. All these things, positive, negative. And what it actually is that the energy that powers the universe, as visible by what happens with the heavenly bodies, actually that's how the Creator programmed them to be. We know this based on the Holy Law and Psalms that, see, like the earth, the sun and the moon and the stars and all that, how the sun goes up in the east, sets in the west, that has been fixed and appointed to be so by the Creator in the beginnings of creation, actually, so that it's like He made this mechanism this way and it works this way because He made it that way. But so we can also see, though, in that the energy that powers the universe goes through, or in this system, including the moon and the sun and the stars and what happens on this earth plane and earth and human life activity, though particularly looking at the moon now, the energy goes through, so the energy powering the universe and that's powering the heavenly bodies and making this system of life on earth here operate perfectly and move forward geometrically, right? Creation goes on perfectly, universally, on and on. It goes through phases of negative and positive. For example, so the shortest one of these appears to be that, look, okay, we're going to, how do I make this simple? Starting at an absolutely new and an empty moon, right? This is where to start to look at how this works so that it makes the most sense. Starting at an empty, literally an empty new moon. Like there is a time, so there's a day, there's a year, month, day, hour, minute, and even second based on what accurate data you have. Generally, you just type in the search bar time and date of the new moon for wherever you are operating. And you get, you basically get a time, a date, and a minute of the new moon. So, generally speaking, at the time of the new moon, right, it's literally gone from emptying out to being empty, and then it's just going to start to increase again. So if we were to put this on a piece of paper, right, you would have a piece of paper at the bottom part of the spacing. You'd have new moon 0 point, then going up all the way for like 14 days, right? About 14 days to full moon, peak point, and then decreasing again from peak point to minimum empty point again to new, then from new to increasing again to peak point. So it's like an equal, like zigzag, so zigging, it's like going up, going down, going up, going down. And this goes on and on. What we can see by this is that the energy that powers the universe in this system here through the moon and how it affects has a energetic force on, so earth, human, and life activity that's also visible by the tides. It goes through phases, and it also goes through, like, starting at the new moon, it's at a basic level. It increases for 14 days to a full moon, and it's at a high level, a maximum high level. Then it goes from a maximum high level down again to an emptying out, to a zeroing out, and then a new moon at a minimum level, standard level again. And then from that minimum standard level to a maximum standard level at a full moon again. So there's always this, it's always going from a standard minimum level to a standard high level, that's a full moon, to a standard minimum level, that's a new moon, to a standard high level, to a full moon. Okay, that's over 14 days. But so, yeah, 14 days, right? Yeah, you've got, yeah, about 14 days if I'm correct. You've got it from zero, so from new moon to full moon, it's about 14 days approximately, yeah. Now, so look, that's what's going on, like basically every 14 days and month by month, this goes on and on. Now, okay, I gotta make this simpler though. At a new moon, at the very moment of a new moon, okay, it's at a standard minimum level, the energy level of the energy that powers the universe as it is operational, at least in this system here, also as we can read by the lunar units, it's at a minimum standard at a new moon. Now, for example, you have the lunar short, so you have the lunar short unit of the tides. So now, every 12 hours, right? So you have a high tide, 6 hours later, you've got a low tide. 6 hours later, you've got a high tide, if I'm correct. So, as a general rule, 3 hours before a high tide, it's a positive short lunar unit of 3 hours. Right. 3 hours after a high tide, it's a negative short lunar unit. And then it's a positive one again, and then the tide is emptied out. And then it's a negative one again for 3 hours while the tide is increasing again. And then 3 hours before a high tide, it's a positive one again. So this short lunar unit has short lunar units in it. So this is just saying that, for example, in 12 hours, right, you've got a high tide. So you've got a high tide. 6 hours later, it's emptied out to a low tide. 6 hours later, that low tide is now increased again to a high tide. And if we go in further into that, so let's take the point of high tide again as a reference point. The time of the high tide, 3 hours later, and for those 3 hours after a high tide, it's a negative, like short lunar unit. And then 3 hours before the low tide, it's a positive one again for 3 hours. And then there's a low tide. And then 3 hours after that low tide, it's negative again for 3 hours. And then 3 hours before a high tide, it's positive again. Now, this is why you should pay attention to this every 3 hours at minimum, because what's happening is that, see, at any given point in time, like I said, you're within 9 different cycles of life. And number 2 and 3 of those 9, the short lunar unit and the long one combined always equate a certain either, so generally a double negative, a neutral, a positive, or a double positive lunar like unit, where the shortest one of those is about 3 hours. So what I'm saying is, think about it from right now. Let's say right now it's like it's almost 12:30. So let's say we have let's say we have a high tide at 12:30. like in 1 minute. So let's say it's 12:30 now. Right now we have a high tide on the minute, at the minute. Okay, so then I have to stop and look and go, okay, hold on. Right, just had a high tide. Now, for the next 3 hours, you're going to have a negative short lunar unit of 3 hours. So for the next 3 hours now, that short lunar unit is negative. Like 3 hours after a high tide. We just had a high tide right now, and for the next 3 hours, basically, it's a negative short lunar unit. That, combined with, for example, right now, the negative long lunar unit, because 3.5 days after a new moon, it's a negative long lunar unit of 3.5 days, where the energy quality is like negative, energetically feminine and resting. So that combined with, that long negative lunar unit of 3.5 days that we are in right now, combined with the negative 3 hour space and part and segment of the short lunar unit that we're in right now, that negative long 3.5 day plus the 3 hour negative that's right now gives a double negative. Okay? Now, just theoretically picture this from your perspective. 3 hours after this negative, right, is done, 3 hours from now, it's a positive. So then you have this positive for the next 3 hours combined with the still 3.5 day negative, and that gives a neutral. So then it's a neutral. Okay, and then you get the picture. So why is this important? Well, listen, because we can know, like literally, we can know what state or what quality the energy is in that powers the universe and earth, human, and life activity around us for certain times. Always within a certain 3 hour time frame that always changes after 3 hours. And, basically also every 3.5 days. So, like, the idea is that at this very moment, you can check the tides at the nearest maritime location. Now, listen. Whew. Oh, okay. This is a little lengthy, yet it is important, and you can benefit from it. The thing is that, so, like, let's just go from right here, right now. Essentially what's going on is that there is always a certain energetic state that the universe and the world around you is in based on what the lunar units are. Now, this can be identified by the tides at the nearest ocean port, whether it's 1,000 miles or right in front of you. You just use the nearest tide chart from the nearest port, the tidometer. See, there is a little bit of a discrepancy in this matter. I'm going to say that the more accurately we can actually map and identify the lunar units and the thus resulting tidal potential that is generated in a given area or place or part of the world or a certain geographical area, as you would also normally, for example, be able to by seeing the tides for a particular ocean port where there is a tidometer, where there's a harbor or whatever. The more accurately we can see the tide generating potential for any location on Earth, the better. So, listen closely. Ideally, you would be somewhere where there's the ability to clearly and most accurately identify the tidal potential at all times. On the most basic level, what this looks like is the following. You live at the beach in a beautiful beach house, and there's a harbor like maybe, 3-4 minutes away from your beachfront property. Yeah. And then what this equates is that you can basically go and you are looking at, right? You're looking at a tide chart where the ocean right in front of your yard, your beachfront property, you can see exactly what time there's a high tide there and exactly what time there's a low tide there. And if this is like, let's say 100, like right out in front of your window, right over there, 50 feet, 100 feet, the closer you are to that tidometer though, technically, the closer you are to the tidometer that measures the tides, the closer, like the more accurate of a real knowledge and data you have of what the tidal potential is right there where you are and around you. Now, there is something, and this is really detailed, yet it's important because remember, the more accurately and efficiently and like exactly and with all attention to detail as much as possible you operate scientifically, the more successful you will be. And I'm talking about being able to be completely on top of the world if you pay attention to this. What I'm saying is the closer you are to a tidometer, the reason why that's good is because you know exactly what the tidal potential is. So like if I literally have it could be a mile away too, and it's still good because it's right there. And you're getting accurate readings very close, the closest possible distance to where you actually are. Why is that good? The reason why that's good is because if that's the case, then, like I said, you have the most accurate data as much as possible about the tide generating potential and what the lunar units are that are behind that, so that you can really know right now exactly, probably by the minute, what the tidal potential is, what the lunar units are. And thus you can identify what state the universe is in energetically, like by the minute. So I can know, for example, if I'm right here and the ocean is right there, like 10 feet over there, and there's a tidometer, 20 meters or whatever, it's safe to say that I'm getting real-time information that may, like, because there's a discrepancy in the reading based on how far away you are from the reading mechanism of the tides. So like, picture this for a second. You're standing here 10 feet from you, there's the ocean right there. And the tidometer is like, okay, maybe it's over there. The closer you are though, the more accurate the information is. So you know if it says high tide 12 p.m. today, 12 p.m., and you're standing right there, the ocean is right in front of you, and the tidometer is like 20 feet over there, or maybe it's half a mile away, maybe it's in the same village at the beachfront or whatever, on the beach. It's like you can walk over to it in like a minute, or even it's literally right over there. You're getting, so what's going on is that because of when it says when the tides are, if it says high tide at 12 p.m., guess what? You basically know right, and 100, basically like as close to 100% as possible, probably as accurately as most humans will ever know, because calculating the tidal potential for a GPS location is it's a thick equation, it's a big equation. But so you got the tidometer right there, the ocean is right in front of you, you know exactly what time by the minute there's a high tide and when there's a low tide. You're standing there and you know, okay, 12 p.m. there's a high tide. 3 p.m. So right now, right, let's say it's 12 o'clock, you're standing there, the tidometer's over there, you've got the tide chart, you're looking at the ocean, and it's 12 p.m. high tide right there in front of you. you know at that point right there, you know exactly when the highest peak point of the energy that powers the universe, that goes through systematic phases of negative and positive, you know right when it's reached its maximum point, and it's visibly, legibly, intelligently traceable and identifiable, even on the physical level, from the sort of metaphysical level, or how it works from the cosmic, from the universe. You can see right there that it's reached its peak. Okay, and then you're standing there, high tide is at 12 o'clock, it just happened, now you know it's 12:01, for the next 3 hours approximately, things are going to decrease again. It's going to be a negative 3 hour time frame approximately, right? And then after those 3 hours, for the next 3 hours, till the tide empties out completely to a low point, low tide, you're looking at this and you know, okay, right now, again, it's another positive 3 hour time space till the low tide. And you know that, now that data, for example, combined with whatever long lunar unit it is, whether it's negative or positive, you then know exactly what energetic state the world, the universe, and like earth life and creation is in around you for a certain, now, generally within a certain geographical area, listen closely now, within a general certain area around wherever that measuring mechanism is that measures the tides and thus identifies the tidal potential and shows it what it is, what cycles it goes through that are visible as the tides being high, low, etc. With varying degrees of accuracy though, because look, here's the thing. If you're on land somewhere, the same force that generates tidal potential and that makes the tides happen where there's a big body of water like the ocean, the same force, right, that does that is also effectively operational on and over areas of earth that are also land, that are not covered with water. It's called tidal potential. Tidal potential is direct expression of how the energy in the universe directly and systematically goes through phases of either negative and positive, and how these have an effect on earth, human, and life activity. So ideally now, as a master, and someone who's mastering their life and destiny, who's a magi, who's a seer, and who is able to clearly see what cycles of life they are in right now, and thus operate accordingly and achieve the maximum amount of whatever good is possible in life thereby, and also master the life and destiny thereby on an ongoing basis, right? Self-mastery, work in progress, right? This person would have the tidal potential identified for wherever they are at all times, as accurately as possible. Listen, like I said with this example of the ocean, that is like probably one of the easier ways of doing this. Yet, it's actually possible to calculate out the tidal potential for any GPS location. And that's the ideal way that it would be, because if you, as a master, someone who's mastering their destiny, if you have the data for, like, so if you have the tidal potential identified for your area of operation, wherever you are, right? Whether you're right by the ocean, there you just have to get a tide chart and it's identified. You can see when it's high tide, low tide, high tide, low tide. But if you're on land somewhere, thousands of miles inland, see, if you're going to use the tide chart from the nearest maritime port that's at the nearest distance from you, it still works, but it would be more accurate to have the reading of the tidal potential for the exact location where you are. And this would give you much more accuracy and also thereby certainty and the ability to basically completely successfully operate with guaranteed achievement or accomplishment of your objectives, because you know exactly what cycles of life you're in. You know what the lunar units are. You know whether it's positive, negative, etc. at the minute, by the minute, right? So ideally, you would be able to calculate out the tidal potential for wherever you are, like every day, wherever you are, and based on the GPS coordinates of where you are. If you were to do this, the more you do this, it's like the more exactly and more absolutely precisely, actually, you know what state the universe is in around you for 3 hours at a time, right? Either negative, positive, combined with the long 3.5 day lunar unit, it's going to be either double negative, negative, neutral, positive, or double positive. Now, why is this important? Why am I saying this? It's actually important and it's extremely valuable because, look, imagine if I decide to accomplish something now and I say, look, this has got to work. I have to get this particular thing accomplished in some basic thing or some big thing or whatever legit thing. If I'm going to achieve an objective, right, I have to coordinate my efforts so that they will be within the right cycles of life and wherein it is propitious for these things that I'm seeking to accomplish to be accomplished. If I do this, they will be accomplished because of the fact that Providence is providing that particular thing at that time, and we're basically just accessing it, working on it, accessing it, and also being propelled by the type of providence at that time for those particular things to be accomplished, and thus they will actually be manifested. Now, the more accurately I know what life cycles I'm in, the more accurately I know what state the world and the universe is around me, and that at certain times, this gives you the ability to, first of all, be able to actually predict the future, and secondarily, though, and more importantly, to actually be able to determine the actual future by your wise actions right now. So what I'm saying is that, look, okay, picture this practically just from your point of view right now. I'm standing here. We got a high, it's 12 p.m. We got a high tide at 3 p.m. So 3 hours from now, we have a high tide. The readings for this are from a maritime port with a tidometer that's like, right? It's very close. It's like 10 minutes from here. Okay? Or you're standing somewhere, and this would be ideal. You're standing somewhere, you know the GPS location, and you've got the tidal potential calculated out for that location, right? So what this equates is that it's as if there was a body of water there, you would know. It would be like having a tide chart even though you're on land, for the reason though, and because of, and for being able to see what the tidal potential is, because it is there too. I'm right here, listen, I'm 250 miles inland right now, yet where I stand here right now, there is a certain tidal potential. And if there was an ocean here, there would be a high tide and a low tide at a certain time here right now. And that could be identified and calculated out. It's not about simulating, okay, if there was an ocean here, when would the high or the low tide be? For that sake, it's about knowing the tidal potential. The same thing that also is visible. See, when you have a tide chart at the ocean, at a port, you're seeing the tidal potential basically identified and legible on a map in the form of a tide chart for that place, because there's a tidometer there. And it's been calculated out, right? But if you're inland somewhere, that same system that works and it's visible at the ocean as the tides is also working right here. And to be able to map that accurately right here, wherever you are, is important. It's possible. I have actually begun this, and I've requested expert assistance on this, and I hope they will answer me with a good answer. If you know, right, for a fact that right here, there is going to be a high tide, or the tidal potential reaches its peak point at 3 p.m., and it's 12 p.m., you know that and it's also a 3.5 day positive long lunar unit. You've got a positive long, and you've got a positive short for the next 3 hours. Guess what? That's a double positive right there. So what this actually equates is that for the next 3 hours, listen, the state that the universe is in, the world, people, yourself, your psyche, how everything in earth, human, and life activity is right now is like this. It's double positive, energetically masculine, and life-giving and life-increasing. So what this equates is that in this double positive unit that is definitely identified now, I know exactly and truly and accurately that for the next 3 hours, it is a double positive lunar unit, right? Combination of long and short is double positive. That is one of the most opportune moments in life when those 3 hour double positive units exist. What can happen in these 3 hours is like what's classified as miracles. Because of why? Because there's a maximum amount of systematically available life-increasing and life-giving energy available at that time. So like in that double positive unit, you could get on the phone, could call somebody, it would lead to a positive increasing results. So if you can clearly map the lunar units out, you can predict the future because you know what state the universe is in energetically for certain times, for like the next 3 hours and the next 3 hours and on and on and on, because you can predict. See, if I know what state the universe is in energetically, right? Like if all of this here and every person for the next 3 hours is in a positive state, I know that if I take action with something, the reaction to that, based on the time frame that this is happening in, like yes, plus, no, negative, right? In other words, based on the state that the universe is in energetically, systematically, periodically, and we can know this at all times within 3 hour time frames that are always ongoing, right? Combination of the short and long lunar units, we can predict. So first of all, we can understand and know why things are how they are and how everything is and why it is the way it is and how we feel or how we are and why our psyche is how it is and so on. It's all explained by the description of the life cycles, and particularly though the lunar units that we're in right now, because they actually make you either active or neutral or resting, either positive, neutral, or negative, right? And that explains to you, it already explains why everything is how it is, why you feel compelled, why you feel active, or you feel neutral, or you feel resting, like taking a nap. It's all because of the units, particularly the lunar units that are going on right now, because that gives and identifies and shows to us what state the universe is in energetically, even covering all of life as related to our existence here. So if you know for a fact, 101% sure, like you know that 3 p.m. there's a high tide. It's 12 p.m. right now. For the next 3 hours, that's a positive short, and a positive long is going on for 3.5 days while this is going on. You've got a double positive unit. Now, in that 3 hour time frame, basically, everything is in a state of being like maximally supplied with force, increase, building, upbuilding, and like a positive life increase or multiplication or increasing and growing kind of a quality. So like in that time frame, if you go and you, for example, you start something. But remember, so we're talking about cycles 2 and 3 here. The lunar short and lunar long, and how they make things energetically a certain way for 3 hours all the time, alternating between negative and positive. Basically, you can predict the future because you will know based on the state, right, the energetic state that the universe and the world is in around you for the next 3 hours, like double positive, right? You know, so you know what state everything is in. You know why you're active with what you're active, because of how it's automatically being propelled by the energetic state that it is right now for 3 hours, right? So you also know what will happen if so because of knowing the energetic state that the universe is in, for example, for 3 hours, and for the next 3 hours, and for the next 3 hours, first of all, you can predict the results of an action that you take. Because generally within human communication and interaction, there's either